However, let's begin in the Middle East, where hundreds more Syrians are headed to the Turkish border over fears that the army is making further advances. They've already taken the town of Jisr al-Shugur, and Syrian military sources tell the BBC that the army plans to move on the nearby town of Marat al-Numan. Nabila Ramdani is a journalist and specialist on Middle East affairs. And a little time ago, Nabila told me where the campaign has got to.
It's very clear that the Syrian regime has been carrying out an absolute onslaught on its own people over the last few months. And the scale of this massacre is absolutely horrific. Not only tens of thousands of people have been arrested so far, tortured, often till to death, but thousands of people have also been killed brutally by the regime and in an indiscriminate manner, killing men, women, and indeed children.
That's the trouble, isn't it? Because we can't know at the moment how many people have actually been killed. I mean, I've seen one quote saying human aid organisations say something like 1,300 people have lost their lives. But how can we know?
Well, absolutely. That's the major difficulty, because the regime is, of course, not allowing journalists to do their jobs, let alone foreign journalists to get into the country. But I've been speaking to people in Syria, and I think we can rely on sources from human rights organizations, and there are very strong reasons to believe that actually the figures put forward by these organizations are in fact much higher, given the brutality of the regime and also the scale of the uprising in Syria. And now we're facing a major humanitarian crisis with up to 7,000 people who have now crossed the border, and real fears that the camps are now not big enough to welcome people who are fleeing the country. And of course, you know, these camps are makeshift camps with dreadful hygienic conditions, and people are there for an undetermined period of time.
Although the Turks, it has to be said, have been very prepared for this, haven't they? The Turks have been ready, and they've opened their borders to these people.
The Turkish authorities have done an impressive job, in fact, by sorting out very swiftly all the logistics to welcome thousands of people in an emergency. What they failed, what they stopped short of doing is to, of course, they've condemned the brutal actions of the regime, and they described it as savagery, and that's exactly what it is. But they haven't gone as far as, cutting all ties with the Syrian regime, which is effectively still seen as a friend of Turkey.
I want to ask you a bit more about where this is all going, because I think this is the 4th Division, isn't it, which is fiercely loyal to President Assad. Now, how far could they go?
You know, President Assad belongs to the Alawite minority, and his security forces are made up by 70% of Alawites, so they are all very loyal to him, and they seem to be pretty determined to put a definite end to a growing protest, which is challenging the regime by the day. There's no indication whatsoever that the regime is allowing any room for maneuver for peaceful demonstrators. Quite the opposite. And the regime is now claiming that 120 people within the security forces have been killed by Syrians, and they are carrying out reprisals against the Syrian population. So there are very strong reasons to believe that even more people will be killed in the forthcoming days, and the refugee crisis will increase as well.
And are there towns other than Jisr al-Shugur which are now actually in the line of fire?
Absolutely. Major cities like Damascus, which hasn't been very active since the beginning of the uprising, is now massive protests are organized day in, day out in cities like Damascus, but of course Aleppo and Hama. Hama is a very significant city because, of course, in 1982, President al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad, brutally quelled the Sunni rebellion and killed more than 20,000 people. And of course, this is very much in the memory of all the Syrian people. And they don't want to go back there. And that's why they're also baffled and perturbed by the relatively silent by the relative silence of the international community.
Do you think that that there is any sign of a change there?
As far as the
international community is concerned, yes.
Well, there seems to be a political deadlock. We've heard today Russia and China boycotting the UN Security Council talks on a draft resolution condemning Syria's deadly crackdown on opposition protests. And now the Europeans, with the help of the US, are now focusing on lobbying countries like Brazil, South Africa and India. But they've all expressed reservations. Lebanon said very forcefully that he will oppose any resolution. And my contention is that by going well beyond the remits of the UN Resolution 1973 in Libya and making it its duty to lead armed rebels to outright victory and thus bringing about regime change, countries like France, Britain and the US have considerably weakened the credibility of NATO, which cannot be trusted as an impartial institution anymore. So all these countries within NATO are, to say the least, haven't been impressed by NATO's decision over Libya, and effectively it's a protest silence.
Nabila Ramdani, and we'll have a report from our correspondent Owen Bennett-Jones on the Turkish side of the Syrian border just after 4 o'clock.